In the following short stories, Boys and Girls by Alice Munro, Red Dress 1946, also by Alice Munro, and Love Must Not Be Forgotten by Zhang Ji, there is a common theme of conformity and nonconformity. In Boys and Girls, the protagonist/narrator is a girl of age 11 who has unstereotypical values for the time period she lives in. In Red Dress 1946, the protagonist is again a girl but of an early teenage this time, and she struggles with the idea of how she should be acting as a girl her age. In Love Must Not Be Forgotten, the protagonist is 30 years old and she struggles with what she wants to do with her life. Boys and Girls is a short story written by Alice Munro set in the 1960s on a countryside farm. During this time, girls were not yet seen as equal to boys in terms of physical labor and mental ability. Gender roles were still prominently defined. At the start of the story, the protagonist cares not about her role as a girl and actively embraces any activity she would find fun. An example of this nonconformity to her gender role is shown mainly through her helping her father with manual labor stereotypical to boys, such as cutting lamb quarter. On the fourth page of the story, a feed salesman is visiting the farm where the protagonist and her family lived in order to talk to the protagonist's father. When the father showed the salesman his new hired hand, the salesman was surprised as he thought she was just a girl, not a human capable of manual labor. But the protagonist did not care for the salesman's words and blushed with pleasure to be referred as so by her father. Another example of nonconformity to gender roles in this story would be the protagonist's dislike to stereotypical female tasks around the house, such as cleaning. Whenever she was helping her mother clean the dishes or prepare food, she would always find a way to slip away from these chores. Her mother comments on this by the fifth page, saying that it's not like the mother had a girl in the family at all. A few more examples include when the protagonist was 11 and her grandmother came to visit during the winter and kept telling her not to do certain things that girls shouldn't do, such as slam doors and keep their knees apart while talking. As the story continues, stereotypical female features start to appear in the protagonist's behavior, such as wondering if she will be considered at a later age, or she will be considered pretty at a later age. Closer to the end of the story, the protagonist starts to decorate her room with lace curtain and fixes herself a dressing table. Her late night stories that she tells herself are now concerned with her appearance and her being rescued from a horrible fate instead of, like before, rescuing another from the same said fate. The story ends with the protagonist conforming to her gender role. This happens after she cries in front of her family for letting a horse free that was supposed to be killed. Her father, who she views highly, dismisses her and says that she is just a girl. The story, Boys and Girls, starts with a non-conforming protagonist, but the protagonist ends up conforming by the end of the story, while the excerpt given in class, Red Dress 1946, again, also by Alice Munro, starts with a conforming protagonist and ends with her non-conforming. The story is set in a high school ballroom where the protagonist struggles with why a boy will not ask her to dance. She had bought a dress in an effort to look pretty, done some research beforehand telling her boys like a cheerful and smiling girl, yet none of these things seemed to help her. Nervous, anxious, and shivering, she wonders why other girls who seemed to have less than her were being asked to dance by boys. Was there something wrong with her, with what she was doing? Overwhelmed with how she should be acting and thinking, she escapes to the bathroom. The protagonist in this story is so concerned with conforming to what she thinks boys would like and is constantly wondering so, she had decided to give up and spend the rest of the dance in the washroom locked away from everyone else. This is when a new character is introduced, one who did not seem to care about conformity and one who seems to have her own plans and goals. Together, the two talk and the character explains that if she did not organize the event, she would not be at the dance because, unlike the other girls at the school, she is not boy crazy. The protagonist is convinced to leave the dance in order to talk elsewhere with the new character. While cutting across the dance floor, a boy asks her to dance, yet she does not hear it and thinks instead that he is only in her way. But, thinking she said yes, the boy and her start to dance, and the protagonist realizes that now she was like the older and popular girl she was admiring at the beginning of the excerpt. Although it is not said explicitly, the protagonist is now non-conforming to the boy-crazy society that is her school. The final story, Love Must Not Be Forgotten, is a story set in China in 1979 where marriage is still used as a tool and considered more like a business deal instead of the product of two individuals deeply in love. The protagonist, named Shashan, is in her 30s and not viewed as in her prime. Yet, she has a suitor who is considered very handsome and loved by all. Other women despise this protagonist as they think she is a nobody playing hard to get, while thinking how tragic it would be if they were married, that the two of them would only be bound by law and morality. Her thoughts drift to her mother. After her death, her mother left behind her journal, and after reading it, the protagonist's previous dilemma disappears. Entries in her mother's journal included day-to-day notes, but also included an entire story about a denied relationship between the protagonist's mother and her lover. Both individuals were unable to express their love to each other due to society's limitations. The protagonist immediately decides to hold off on getting married and instead wait for her true love. She expresses her new values, saying that if everyone would wait instead of rushing into marriage, many tragedies could be averted. Yet, if you decide not to marry, you are essentially challenging society and will be viewed by it as an eccentric who looks down on ordinary people, not respecting age-old customs. You will be accused of being neurotic, having guilty secrets, or having made political mistakes. At the same time, if you succumb to society's ideas and put the chains of an indifferent marriage around your neck, you will suffer for it for the rest of your life. Even waiting in vain is better than loveless marriage, says Shashan. Society at the time period of this story in China was very harsh, as it would not accept you if you did not conform to its expectations. The protagonist realizes this after reading the journal and knows it as she makes her decision to reject her handsome suitor. In conclusion, each of these stories, the protagonist had to face an issue dealing with conformity. Whether they started by conforming or finished by doing so, each of them had to make a fairly large decision, conscious or unconscious of it. Depending on variables in their life, such as the time period they lived in, they were each influenced in their own way, causing them to change with or against society.